I'm Jake Aaron Villarreal, born and raised in Silicon Valley, here to take you behind the scenes to share what it's like to be a startup founder, the journey they're on, the problems they face, and the products they build that are shaping industries. I'm excited to have with us today Ofer Ronen, founder and CEO of Tomato AI. Ofer, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, thanks for joining. Ofer's got a storied career. He's been not just the CEO of Tomato AI, whose solution softens the accent heard on calls using general AI or Gen AI. He's previously led contact center AI work at Google. In addition, he sold two startups to Google and AIC. He mentors entrepreneurship students at Stanford over the last 12 to 13 years and occasionally invests in startups. Occasionally, but I've seen the list and it's a
Uh-huh.
lot, and they're the good companies. So he's done a great job there too. Um, Before we dive in here, Ofer, where are you joining us from today?
Jake, I'm in Silicon Valley, so in appropriate place for this podcast in the East Bay, a town named Danville.
Hundreds of AI startups are launching every month, battling to build their founding teams. As a leader, your job is to get results. When it comes to hiring, that's where it gets tough. So you go out and you try a recruitment firm, but they don't understand your story. They're off target, and when they send you candidates, it's a waste of time. We believe you should never have your time wasted. That's why we launched MatchRelevant, because your story is more than just an open role. It's your founder's journey, the problem you're solving, the product you're building, and why it matters. When we work with companies, we make sure we understand your whole story. So when we go out and do a search, we're on target. It's worth their time. They're interested. And more importantly, it's worth yours. And when it comes to hiring engineers, we work to make sure we get it right by deploying a team of seasoned CTOs that have built some of Silicon Valley's best companies. They can collaborate with you in the technical interviewing process. They can be a sounding board, or they can run it for you. When it comes to building teams, there's no time to waste. Let's make it count. If you have a role that needs to be filled, book a time with a hiring guide at matchrelevant.com and learn how we do it. Very cool. I know Danville, and that's where all the successful entrepreneurs end up. So, congratulations.
Appreciate that. Yeah, we love it here.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Silicon Valley as well, and really love hearing where companies come from and the pulse of technology, whether it's in Silicon Valley or outside. It doesn't matter so much anymore, but it certainly does help when you're there. Um, let's dive a little bit into your background, your origin story before we kind of get into your company. So, kind of walk us through where this all started. How did you go from becoming a kid to eventually becoming an entrepreneur investor, and what was the track to get you into technology?
I have to admit, I grew up in the right environment for that to happen. My dad, we moved to the US from Israel so my dad can get his PhD in electrical engineering. And then I had an older brother who was big on computer science and went to Carnegie Mellon for computer science. And so that's like the environment I grew up in. But I would say there was no influence related to entrepreneurship. That came elsewhere from a relative that had a business, not necessarily a high tech startup, but I grew up seeing that and really was curious about becoming a business person. And then in college, took some entrepreneurship classes and tinkered a bit with that. Only after accepting my first job after school, about a year in, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I quit and uh, yeah, it was like on a certain birthday, I decided, okay, I'm gonna do it. And then a month later, I was back at my parents' house, starting a company.
Ah,
Yeah.
I've been there before,
Yep.
back at the parents, and you got to start with, all the advantages you can get, in
Yes.
tr- including saving costs. But that's really, really cool. Technology is always changing and evolving. And, I look at it as, how can you take technology and solve problems that matter? Really understanding the problem that you're looking to solve today with Tomato AI. I'm excited to get into that. But really, if you look at businesses, there's a lot of problems they have, and if you can use technology to solve them,
hmm
it's great. What problem are you solving with Tomato AI?
Well, I have to admit, I have some context. Before I started Tomato AI, I worked for years on contact center AI at Google. And they have an incubator called Area 120 where I did two contact center AI startups. So I had all this understanding of the space, and I have to give credit to my co-founder who I worked with at Google, who had the idea for Tomato AI, tomato. We reduced the level of accent heard on calls in real time. The insight there was that there's so many people in the world we could activate and bring online, and just grow the whole ecosystem of call centers worldwide by making folks sound uh, more like what the listeners used to hearing. So in our case, let's say making someone Indian, Filipino sound more Americanized. So just having been in the industry, I was like, wow, that's a big idea. And I could do like the back of envelope math. I like to do large deals. I've done like 300 million plus deals in the contact center space at Google. And that was my North Star. Can I do a 9-figure deal with this, with a business idea was my litmus test. And I could do the math and get there with this on the high end. So that was like a big motivation. And I was like, okay, this doesn't exist. Like it was a new area. I like to do new things.
When you talk about Google and contact center and AI,
Yeah.
it sounds like a lot. How many years were you at Google?
I was 7 years at Google. It was the longest job I ever kept because I have a string of startups I've done. And often my happy place is when I'm doing a startup, the 0 to 1 experience, especially. But they let me be a CEO of a startup. So that kept me there for a while. Uh, and that was after selling a startup into Google. So I just kept the entrepreneurship journey and became an intrap, I guess is the term, for a few years.
Can you share some of the numbers when you were at Google with the company that you were building inside of Google?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really fun company. In the last couple of years, the virtual agent space really heated up with ChatGPT and all that. But that was the space I was in for many years at Google, and we built voice and chat virtual agents for companies like Verizon, big companies, Fortune 10 companies that have a ton of calls coming in and very complex conversations. And so that specific internal startup called Chatbase would take millions of past conversations between humans and use that to create a robust virtual agent. It was like a big data analysis kind of capability. So that was the effort, but it was a good challenge. And what I loved about it is that there are so many people, everyone uses one of these big cell phone companies, and we end up working with a number of them, and so I could really feel the impact on people.
Yeah. Why is this space important to you?
Yeah. So actually, what's really cool about the new work I'm doing, which is like in the voice AI, accent AI space, is that if you really think about it, our ability to communicate effectively with people really can be transformative in our lives. And so if we can make people everywhere in the world better able to clearly communicate, their economic opportunities grow tremendously. And so there's all these like connections we can make, job opportunities we can create by putting it out in the world. And I'm excited about that.
Yeah. I took a year off and traveled around the world, and I wanted to understand the trends and the technology and to come back and build my own company. Uh, and found out the most important aspect of a company wasn't the technology or the trends I was looking for. It was really the people behind those
Mm,
companies.
yeah,
And I spent some time in the Philippines, and you walk down, there's rows and rows of call centers and BPO facilities. And,
that's right.
it's changing their lives when
Yeah.
they're there learning a new service, how to communicate differently. So I can understand the value of what you're building. Walk us through the product a little bit
Yeah.
of what a BPO would be getting from Tomato AI.
By the way, love that you traveled for a year. I also traveled for a year, 24 countries after one of the exits. So we
Nice.
probably have a lot to talk about there, but let's go back to business here. So in the Philippines, if you look at rural Philippines, they have thicker accents and they're less often getting these jobs. And we can unlock rural towns in the Philippines and elsewhere around the world by making them sound more like main cities like Manila kind of agents. So we can close that gap in that country. In terms of like the way that technology works, it's something that you install on a PC and it takes like 3 to 5 minutes, and then it picks up the voice from the mic and uses what's called a speech to speech voice AI model that transforms the voice based at the phoneme level. It's trained on hundreds and hundreds of accented speakers, and so it knows what to do based on the training data, and it just works for any new speaker. So that's one of the things when building an AI company is, or any company is, you want it to be low friction to onboard, and by making it just work magically for any new speaker, that will help it spread much faster.
Yeah. I understand the benefit of the employee, the one on the
Mhm.
calls that doesn't really speak English perfectly or whatever language
Wow.
perfectly. What's the benefit for the BPO company
Yeah.
that they get?
So BPOs have a very competitive landscape, and they are always looking to differentiate. And if you can, at let's say a lower price point, offer a higher quality product, more trust, more intelligibility by the agent hired, improve the KPIs for this industry, which are like customer satisfaction, lower handle time, less callbacks. If all those metrics get better and you can keep the price lower, that helps you win accounts and keep existing accounts. Now, with that said, I do believe that over time, agents will get paid more as they use this because they'll get better results. They're selling more, they're converting, or getting better scores, and so both can be true. Like you're gonna overall as a BPO offer a better product, and your people over time will get better pay.
And for the listeners that don't know what BPO is, it's business process outsourcing. It's the big call centers or the big organizations that
Hmm.
bring in their local talent to support outsourced or offshore services to US companies or UK companies or any other countries' companies. So really cool. I know it's been around for a while, but this technology is going to be game changing for a lot of industries. Who cares most about your technology when you're out there selling now that you're, you know,
Yeah.
presenting your product?
Um, this morning, for example, I was on the call with a regional telco that offshores to the Philippines, and it was their head of innovations and AI was their title, that organized the meeting, invited other constituents, the head of the call center, also networking, various folks they thought should hear this, but they were so excited about the potential here because they realized it can really be game changing in the sense that all of a sudden it's easier to hire more people, it's easier to like gain customers, all these activities that really matter to them day in day out.
Yeah, that's it's interesting when you start selling into a new sector or bringing in a product into the market, the landscape of who you're selling to, and you might think it's one person and it ends up being a
Hmm.
totally different leader in the company, or it might be selling to Congress at some level within a company that you don't know. Everyone has to buy into. So it sounds like an enterprise sale, but
Yeah,
being AI, I'm sure you're getting a lot of traction just based on that
yeah,
alone.
yeah. Definitely, like there's a lot of interest, as we all know, right now in the AI space, and companies are looking to pilot and try solutions, and so that only helps us get into deals. One of the other cool things about this versus previous ones is there's no rip and replace. Like with other solutions I've had, oh, okay, you got to get nuance or someone out that's entrenched and has its champions. But this is usually a new type of category of solution, and so that accelerates the sales cycle. No rip and replace.
Yeah, that's great. What's a lesson that you've learned from your previous startups that you've run
Yeah.
that's been helpful for this one?
Yeah. So, there's lessons learned about ways of being and how to manage through a startup. Startups are a roller coaster, and they're not for everyone. And daily, you get all kinds of news, and often with early stage startups, it's like tough news to work through. And as the CEO, it all comes to you, the toughest ones. So I've learned over the years to enjoy the process, appreciate that I get to do this, and keep my optimism and push forward. Because sometimes, like, all of a sudden you get there, and things are starting to work and tick, and the good news starts rolling in. So I have that perspective, um, which is much needed, especially for deep tech startups. We're 2 years in. We've worked so hard on the tech, come so far, and required a lot of patience.
Yeah. You know, when you create a company and you create a startup, you have to be strategic. And a lot of times companies talk about a moat or what can you do that's going to keep the competitors from just copying what you've built.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's good to not share that information, and sometimes it doesn't really matter because you're so far ahead. It
Hmm.
is what it is. Can you touch on that a bit?
Yeah. So the moat has to do with original research and development we had to create using PhD scientists over the couple of years, because there was no off-the-shelf or solution out there you could enhance or tap into, and so a lot of like earned research. And another moat is the data moat. So how do you build up a capability around data that's a competitive advantage, where you're getting data that's hard to get, and it's properly cleaned up, and what is the data even that would work best, the type of data that's also earned. Like, it took us a while to like learn about what the data should be, and how to clean it, and where we can get it, and that takes time. And then, yeah, like you alluded to earlier, the teams. So you need world class people. You really need like the best people in the world on your team. And so we've been carefully curating and building up our team, and it helps that between us, we've sold like 4 startups and have had a lot of credibility. That helps attract talent. And we created a culture that also is one where people want to work. In our case, remote first. We have our fun offsites where we ride tractors and shoot bow and arrow and all kinds of stuff like that. But it's for people that like that flexible, remote kind of office experience.
Yeah, that's really cool. Um, what's your favorite part of the startup experience? You've had
Hmm.
3, 4.
Yeah.
What do you like best?
Okay. I won't lie. I distinctly remember the days when I sold my startups. Those highs of the exit. Um, but that doesn't last. That is like a high that is there for maybe a couple of months. You're like, wow, I'm so awesome.
Yeah.
um, but so that's one thing that I'll point out, but it's not the ultimate reason. Um, I love the impact. So every startup I've done has touched millions of people's in one way or another, and it's just hard to even like imagine that, like, that you can affect millions and millions of people. There's not many jobs outside of tech where you can do that. Maybe media, yeah, but it's not often that you can say you did that. And so I love having a positive impact. And in this new startup, we have a very powerful mission, and excited to realize that.
Yeah. Really cool to hear that. Yeah, the money matters at times, but it's not all about the money, which
Yeah.
is the important aspect. Um, what's the biggest challenge you're going through now as a company?
Yeah. I would say, like, one of the things as a founder and CEO of a company that you're always thinking about is runway and that next funding round. Ultimately, like my job as CEO is to secure runway and to make it as long as possible without overly diluting too soon the company. So finding that balance. And so, yeah, I just did another raise to give us a bit more time to build up the story for the next raise. But it's almost like these are the chapters that you think about as a CEO, and you're never done. You're always thinking about, okay, what's that next chapter? This one I can close, and what's the next one? So I would say like that is top of mind, and art. It's not just a science that you can like get better at.
Yeah. Every company at some point, maybe the younger ones, not so much, maybe a little bit longer tenured organizations go through this more, but pivots and shifts and having to realign your target audience or maybe just adding more technology to your platform. Has there been one or two, if in this company or if not in other companies that you recall going through that really was a process to get through and kind of how you came out the other side?
Yeah, I've pivoted a couple times, and I'll share the one maybe at Google and the internal startup. So we were building analytics for chatbots, and we were doing it uh, years ago, like when Facebook just came out with their chatbot platform, and we end up having 1 million bots using our analytics. Wow, sounds awesome, but it wasn't easy to make money. It wasn't a good business in that sense. So we had nice vanity metrics, and so we made the decision to pivot into building bots in a data-driven way, what I described earlier, and away from the analytics, and that made all the difference. Within a couple years, we closed over $500 million in deals for this, based on the pivot. So. And this one was a pivot that was like not a huge pivot. It was still in the same realm, but we had to like retool, rebuild, and it wasn't easy because we had to convince our internal investors that we're going to do this. With all those vanity metrics looking so good, we had to switch.
And money becomes important to the investors, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's great to hear. I know we've gone through a few ourselves, and it's never as easy as you think and takes longer than you expect. But when you
yeah,
get through the other side, you've learned so much more, and you're appreciative of the learnings. You don't want to go through it again, but you can't pay for that. You have to kind of just go through it. If
yeah.
you come out the other side, you could really use that. So that's great to hear. What are some of the biggest breakthroughs that you've had with your current company personally or as a company technically?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I would say a lot of stuff that happens at startup is incremental, and then before you know it, you're like, "Whoa, we have this awesome tech on our hands." But it's painfully incremental often, where you're working towards a target that once you get there, So I'm talking about deep tech right now, like, but yeah, you get an AI startups, like we're at some point it becomes good enough that you can like go into the market and not churn through customers too fast. So mostly that's been the experience with this startup, where there wasn't like a moment and all of a sudden we were there. Um, so gradual progress. Um, Otherwise, yeah, if I was to think about a breakthrough, I'll go back to an earlier startup. So I sold a startup to IAC, the parent company of Match.com, Ask.com, and many other brands that we know. Uh, and that startup, I initially had a very manual way of like on ramping customers, and it was all this friction to like get people to like try out our solution, and it was painful. Um, and then we decided to come out with an API, and that happened by going to a conference. I started describing an API before we even wrote a line of code. I was like, "Oh, this is how you can work with us." And I described an API. They got really excited. And so I went back to the team after the conference, like, "Oh, we got to build this API." I told everyone we have one. Um, And that API all of a sudden changed the game. Like we turned on one customer, we got to $4 million ARR.
Whoa.
And without the API, it wouldn't have worked. So, a couple lessons. One is sometimes, make it up as you go, get feedback on something maybe you haven't built yet. And in person helps a lot for like the back and forth. And second, really think about onboarding friction, which I touched on before, and more scalable ways of working with customers.
And go to conferences too, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You never know who you're going to meet and what's going to come out of that, or a big proponent of that. So
yeah, exactly.
that's really cool. Great. What do you know now that you wish someone would have told you about before you started this deep tech startup?
Yeah. That there'll be a lot of, if you're doing your own models, like AI models, that a big part of your budget will go towards training models, also buying data, but the training part is significant. And unlike a typical startup, you need to raise maybe 30%, 40% more. Uh, to cover some of that expense, which is unique to AI
Mm.
startups with foundational models. Um, so that's a learning, but then it becomes your moat as well. We're talking about moats. Not every team can raise enough money to do a deep tech startup and to train models like that. And there's two kinds of teams. There's the teams that have a track record and the teams that have traction. We're the track record type. We've sold for startups, and so we could raise $12 million to date, on our credibility. Again, a moat that a lot of teams couldn't do. So play to your strengths. Yeah, and with AI startups, raise more money.
Yeah. Well, they're raising a lot and we can see it. So it's
Yeah,
really exciting, this transformation in technology. It's, we've waited 24 years for it. We went through the dot-com boom and,
yeah.
you had cloud computing and you had mobile and you had,
Hmm.
a lot of different, transformations, but this is the one that's impacting, it seems like almost every industry. So really cool to hear your story. And more importantly, to actually see your product. If you go to the website,
Hmm.
Tomato AI, you can click on a button, hear someone speaking, and then click on the other button with your technology, and it's as if they are, all of a sudden Americanized, or
Hmm.
just have that technology that's helping them through. So, proof is in the pudding, but we love what we've heard from what we've seen so far. What's on the roadmap for you as you go forward in
Yeah.
2024 and into 2025?
A lot of this work is to unlock it for different markets. And so we're focused on the biggest call center markets: India, Philippines, Pakistan. And then we'll unlock other markets one at a time. And so a lot of the work is to do that within English and then to go into other languages like European ones. Um, so I would say like that's a big focus in the like near to midterm. Longer term, there's like other capabilities we could build in, like improving the grammar in real time and localizing it. But you gotta take one step at a time. With another lesson is focus. If you spread yourself thin, you don't end up being the best in the world at that one thing you're known for.
Yeah, I like that focus. We hear that all the time. So, well, really great to have you on. And Ofer, if anybody wants to find you or find your company, Tomato AI, where do they go?
So for sure, go to Tomato AI to our website, and you can reach out to us there. I'm seeing all those communications, and and can respond. Also, I encourage people to go to LinkedIn. That's a good way to get in touch and find me. Ofer Ronen is my handle, my full name, and excited to like see if I can be helpful to folks in your audience.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining. Really appreciate you having the courage to come on and tell your story, and to all the listeners for listening. It means a lot to me. You spent your time with us today. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now, but can't wait to catch up with you all on the next episode. Until then, take care. If you like what we're doing, don't forget to subscribe. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And follow us on YouTube, where we go behind the scenes to learn what it takes to be a startup founder.